Okay, so today this is going to be a quick video to tell you a little about whether or not if you're running Google ads now, you're running Facebook ads now, maybe some other ads online, should you use the tracking? Of course, if you're at the stage you are tracking already, which I assume you are, and if you're not, you need to be. No questions if and or buts about it. The tracking that you can have set up through Google Ads or your Facebook ads, whatever one you're doing, or perhaps if you're doing both, can that tracking be relied on? Or should I use Google Analytics for my tracking and Google Tag Manager? And for somebody who's never had any experience with tracking their ads before, this is a very difficult question. And I'm going to take you through all the pros and cons of each, what each can do, what I would do for different types of businesses, i.e. therefore for your business. You can identify what one you need to be or want to use for yourself to have the best, you'll ultimately make the most money from these ads and for your business through running these ads. And pretty much everything else you need to know to go along with it to, at the end of the video, walk away, know exactly what you need to do. So just to give you a quick background, I've set up hundreds of different tracking for different PPC accounts at this stage. Run a PPC agency here called Guarantee PPC, had over 300 different accounts that I've audited, had over 100 clients. So I understand the differences between, the inherent Google tracking or, on Google Ads itself versus Google Analytics, Facebook versus Google Analytics, and combination of all three, how they come into play. So I am a little bit qualified to speak on this if you're wondering how I came up with the solutions that I did on this video, basically. So that all said, disclaimer out of the way, I normally on my videos, if you haven't seen any out that were put out by me yet, that I have a list of things that I go through, that all the stuff that you need to know about this, how to make a correct decision for yourself, how to track results, and ultimately get the millions of dollars a year in revenue and profit you're trying to do with these ads at the end of the day, down the road once you've got them scaled up, whatever. So the first thing is, what's the difference between Google Ads and Google Analytics tracking? And you could replace Google Ads with Facebook ads. So there's quite a few differences, actually. Technical differences and non-technical. The non-technical is one reports higher, one reports lower almost every time. If you set up conversion tracking inside Google Ads, meaning like you aren't using Google Analytics at all or Tag Manager at all, you're using the Google Ads conversion menu, you set up a goal through there and that's it, the amount of conversions and the amount of conversion revenue, if you're doing e-commerce, or tracking revenue in any way, that's always going to report higher. And always is a strong word, but always will report a little bit higher, sometimes a little, sometimes a whole lot, than Google Analytics. And I'm going to explain why here in a moment, but believe it or not, I've actually seen as much as 2 to 3 times more. The Google Ads conversion goal, I'll have Google Ads conversion goal set up, Google Analytics through Google Tag Manager goal set up for revenue, showing how much revenue came through the shopping cart on a that came from people who clicked on an ad from campaigns that we were running on Google Ads. And the Google Ads tracking is showing, 2 to 3 times more, showing 5,000 in sales Google, and then the same goal that I've set up in Google. So the way that it works is if you set up the revenue or goal tracking through Google Analytics, and you could be using Google Tag Manager, maybe not, you could import your Google Analytics goals to Google Ads. And they do that because they know a lot of people use Google Tag Manager. It's easier. But in the situation where I actually had, if you go to the conversion menu under the wrench icon in the top right-hand corner of your screen, you have Google Ads purchase goal. And then right underneath it, Google Analytics imported goal for tracking e-commerce purchases right underneath it. Google Analytics is saying 2,000. Google Ads is saying 5,000. And you're left scratching your head, what one do I pay attention to? So be aware of that. A lot of times, I said the average is probably 50% underrepresented, but still a lot. At least in terms of, telling how well this is working, which, by the way, I'm going to throw a disclaimer out there at the end of this video that you don't want to use the tracking to see how much money you're making. There's way too many holes in the data. Products that are expensive, the more expensive the product or service, the worse it is, because people have to make long-term decisions as to whether or not they're going to reply or buy or not. And but also just from the standpoint of using the data to guide your ads, because that's the primary reason why you set up conversion tracking, not to see if it works, because there's other better ways of doing that, as I'm going to mention and had touched on just a second ago, that you want to be able to use the best data you can, right? Which one should you go on? And so the answer, like everything else in life you're going to find, is kind of somewhere in the middle. And so I'll finish explaining what the differences between Google Analytics and Google Ads is, or Facebook Ads and Google Analytics is, so you can see what, you could kind of see at a base level how this works, and then you can help make a decision for yourself based upon that information, basically. But moving on, one works off of interaction time, one works off of purchase time. So if you're talking about Google Ads or Facebook Ads, they're going to, in other words, if a user clicks on an ad on the 1st of March and they purchase, assuming that you have your cookie, what they call the cookie window, set up for 30 days at least, somebody comes on March 29th, when that purchase or that goal is tripped or triggered, it's going to show that purchase or that goal was triggered on the 1st of March, back when it first happened. In Google Analytics, that's not the case. They're looking at, when it, so on it'll in that same scenario, the purchase or the goal when it was triggered, it's going to show that came in on the 29th in Google Analytics. Just the first thing you got to know. So with that, tied to that, the reason for that is one tracks and uses users. So a user is like a person, and one uses sessions. A session, so a person can visit the site more than once, and then that would mean if they came to the site, left, came back a second time, that would be 2 sessions, even though it would be one user. Google Analytics uses these sessions. So, and then Google or Facebook Ads, Google Ads uses users. Now, what you need to know about this one is if you have, let's say, a clothing store, you get a lot of people repeat purchasing. They buy more than once, and you don't have to where. So basically, they're in Google Ads, under the conversions menu that you can have it set up, and the same thing in Facebook, it'll say, do you want to count every time someone triggers this goal, or just one time for the user? Because it's all goes back to users. You want to choose one time if you think that one user can actually come back and purchase more than once. Another scenario would be if you have a roofing company, somebody calls, they buy, and then they're calling throughout the process to get updates. You don't want to have your ad data be mucked up with that post-purchase data and making it look like certain keywords and certain ads and certain times of the day are more productive than they are. So you want to only count one, not every, is how you have that set up. Whereas in Google Analytics, it's just going to count and count and count. And so if you're looking at, did a Facebook ad trigger, something in one of my goals in Google Analytics, that person, if they came back 10 times to call, even though it's all linked to one purchase, it's going to show 10. So, but you can, like I said, fix that just by only counting one, not every. And then for all practical purposes, you don't have to worry about that particular issue. Next thing to mention is one tries to deduplicate your purchases using a last non-direct click model. So Google Analytics, what it's trying to do is, so if you, let's say you have ads coming in from Google and Facebook both directly. Google Analytics is only going to be able to, is basically going to give one credit, not both. And so before Google, if you're using Google Ads and you're importing your goals from Google Analytics to Google Ads, which I normally do, by the way, I'm with that said, and without getting into too many details there, it's going to, deduplicate, and if the user, the last thing they didn't click on was through an ad, basically, or if it was a direct visit to your site, it ignores that, and then it goes to the second last visit to look at and see if it was somebody who clicked on the ad or not, and if it did, then it's going to push the data back to Google Ads. Whereas on Google Ads, as long as, obviously they have different attribution models, but for the most part, most of the attribution settings that are in there by default, if they clicked on an ad and then they went, they clicked on another ad and then they clicked on a referral link from another website and then they purchased, that goal in Google Ads is going to show that that particular ad is what drove the purchase. So just so you know. So where this actually comes in handy is if you have lots of different paid traffic sources coming in, Google Analytics won't give you an artificially inflated number as to how many purchases or conversions you're getting from a particular source, because it's not going to let you say, the same person came from here and came from here, because a lot of people don't recognize there's a long journey that the user goes through to actually purchase. They don't just click on an ad and instantly, more than half of the time, buy. You got to realize that people need to think on stuff. They need to wait to get paid, so on and so forth. And then you'll run Facebook ads, and then people find the Facebook ad. They'll say, that's interesting. When I get paid on the first, I will decide to purchase that. And then later on the first, they go Google the name, they click on your brand ad, and then they purchase. And then for all practical purposes, Facebook and Google is going to claim credit for the same person. Whereas Google Analytics is not going to do that. But on the flip side, Google Analytics, Google Analytics short-sighted view of things is that Facebook really should, if you think about it, get credit for that purchase, because they did most of the heavy work of actually getting that person down the path of purchasing, and Google did very little. So there's pros and cons to both of them. Which I'll explain how I would work around that here as I get to the second part of the video, which is what should I do. And then the last thing you mentioned here, one tries to take all the credit it can. So basically, you have to put yourself in the business's shoes, Google's shoes, Facebook's shoes. They want to make their ads look better, it's not better than they are. I could say that, but Google, please don't go after me. They want to make it look as profitable as possible so people keep advertising, whether it is or it is not. That's just, whether I can prove that or not, businesses are mandated by their shareholders to make money. So if they're going to take credit for something else, as long as you clicked on an ad, that makes sense for them. So you got to take with a grain of salt, with the information that the Google ads and Facebook ads is telling you right up front, and you can't blame them. And a lot of times, for all practical purposes, they clicked on that ad after clicking on 12 other things, and then they clicked on 12 things after that, and it's still going to claim the purchase as if it did it all itself. So anyway, past all that, now you know the differences between Google Analytics and Google Ads / Facebook ads, how it works. And another thing I didn't mention too here is Facebook and Google Ads, they're set up through using cookies. The user cookies are a piece of web code that's downloaded to your web browser, which is like Google Chrome or Internet Explorer, whatever you're using, so that when you click on the ad and then later on, 2 weeks later, you come back to the site, Google / Facebook can tell that it's the same user, and they remember what ad you previously clicked on. And so that it can give credit to that ad and also put in the tally that a purchase came from there. So, lost my train of thought here. Oh, okay, sorry. You might want to edit that part out. But cookies are inherently also not good, because a lot of times certain browsers won't accept cookies. People can delete their cookies. People can switch devices and if they're not logged into both devices, and it's going to look like two different people. So there's inherent flaws in using cookies. And so with Google Analytics being last click, as they call it, where they look at the last interaction and only assign the purchase to the person who got it last to have some sort of order, you're not using cookies. It's more of a controlled outcome, if you will, that's not going to vary a lot from day to day or month to month, to do some sort of analysis as to whether or not this ad should run versus that ad should run. Just wanted to also make sure that you know that. But anyway, with all that said, now you know the technical differences. So what should I do about my business? Which one should I pick? As I promised you I would deliver here. If you have an expensive product or something that takes time to decide on, and again, unless you're selling a $25 broom, people, basically when they're searching for it, they need to think. They need to look at other options. They need to wait to get paid. People look for stuff before they even decide to buy it, i.e. research stage. But stuff with the higher commitment, the higher purchase amounts that require to have a longer purchase life cycle, I'm going to be using Google and the Facebook tracking, and I'm using Google Analytics tracking, and I'm going to use them all. I'm going to use all the data I can, knowing it's inflated on Google Ads and Facebook, if I'm running both, to guide my ads, so I can get the maximum data I can about what ads are kind of working, what genders are kind of working, because it's hard accumulating enough data to make decisions as to I should bid 50% more for female and 50% less for male, that kind of thing, which you should be, that's what inherently how you're going to be able to make money. If you're not making money that you want today from your ads, how you're going to get there 6 months down the road, whatever. It's not about if you can make money. It's about identifying which of these subsegments of your traffic are what they're worth, adjusting how much you're willing to pay for those subsegments, dialing it in, and then now you have your ROI that you want. Then you move on to something else and do the same thing there. So I'm going to use Google Analytics to kind of overall see which of the channels seem to be working a little bit better than the others, just for that purpose. But I'm going to optimize my bidding inside my ad accounts on Google and Facebook based upon the tracking that they have to give me the maximum data to optimize possible. If I'm using multiple PPC sources, meaning like Google and Facebook or Google and Taboola, whatever, I am actually going to use both, even if it's a cheaper product or something where the person doesn't have to decide a lower or lesser purchase life cycle. Again, so mainly because because going back to what I said before, Taboola, if they clicked on a Taboola ad and a Facebook ad, I don't want that same person to be credited to both places. It's going to make my ads, my PPC overall as a program look like it's a little bit better, working better than it is. So I'm going to use Google Analytics to bring my view of the whole thing down to earth. Again, even though I'm going to use the data inside each one of my ad accounts, setting up the tracking that they inherently have on each one of these individual ad platforms that I'm using to guide the ads. And so with that said, basically if you have more than one PPC source, I'm going to use the tracking inside the ad account and Google Analytics both every time. If I have something with a higher commitment, or where there's a lot of decision making that needs to come into play, or people have to wait to get paid. That happens way more often than you think. Even for a $200 item, you would be surprised how your purchases will spike 30, 40, 50% on when people normally get paid on the first of the month. That I'm going to do both. So basically, another way you could think about it is the only way I'm not going to do both and actually rely on the tracking inside the ad account for doing bid adjustments inside the ad account and using Google Analytics to kind of see overall how the different platforms stack up a little bit and what the real return is coming in, to eyeball it on a regular basis, as if it's a cheap item and I'm only using one source. At that point in time, Google Analytics could pretty much handle it. And I'm just going to import Google Analytics to Google Ads. Obviously, on Facebook, I'm still going to set it up there. But for Google itself, I'll just to make it, it's not really that important. I'll just import Google Analytics, the Google Analytics goal to Google Ads, and call it a day. So that all said, talked about this earlier, but the tracking inside your ad accounts, because, and I also said inherent flaws of using cookies, but also apart from using cookies, conversion tracking is not the panacea that everybody thinks it is. I've had all kinds of clients come to me that, they say, Corey, I need an 8-to-1 return on my ads. And I say, okay, you're getting it. You could tell by looking at your sales volume as it's increasing on the same ad spend. And even though your Facebook ad doesn't say you got an 8-to-1 return, it says a 5-to-1, you got to realize that not all the conversions are being counted. That's just the inherent part of the system there. And if you're going to mandate it has to be 8-to-1, okay, shut it all off. You're not going to ever make any money. People don't want to listen to that sometimes. 10, 20, 30% of the time, people shoot themselves with their own foot. That tracking data a lot of times can be undercounted by 50, 60, 70%. You could show you got a 2-to-1 return, but really it's an 8-to-1. Especially also when you consider, especially with Google Ads, you run a lot of Google Ads, your organic gets really good. Because if you're making money with Google Ads, that whatever you had to do to make money with Google Ads, make sure that your site's optimized for a good user experience to be ranked well organically, and then half your return you're really getting from your Google Ads is being subsidized through your organic rankings. So really, you don't need an 8-to-1, you need a 4-to-1, and then you get all these rankings on top of it. And just by running other ads that are running as much profitable Facebook and other ads as you can, that's also going to increase your organic rankings because you're going to look more like an authority. So it's just another way that you don't need to actually have it where it says 8-to-1, nothing less inside your ad account. You're actually going to make why you should still be running the ads. Use the data to optimize the ads. Don't settle for 2-to-1. Always be looking to get it higher in terms of your ROI, what's showing in your ad account and through your conversion tracking, but don't use it as an end-all, be-all to see if you're actually you're making money, because it's not designed well for that. There's too many people who switch devices. They don't have cookies. They're on a browser that don't accept cookies. On and on and on. I could go through a list of 5 or 10, 15 different things why conversion tracking won't work in different situations for different people. But what you're going to do is what I do that at the end of the day to see if things are working, other than using the tracking inside the Google, the ad accounts and through Google Analytics. As I already mentioned, I'm going to figure out past 3 years by month what my sales are. And I'm going to shoot for keeping the PPC budget overall that I have consistent. And I'm going to shoot for a 25% increase in sales year over year compared to the previous month, same month for the previous year, in that I'm optimizing the PPC ads to get that number up. And people sometimes can't get past this. They say, Corey, well, it could have came from here or here or here. Basically, okay, fine. Don't change a whole bunch of stuff about your marketing. Just focus on your PPC if you can. But once you get the 25% increase, then so you're basically going to increase your PPC budget, and then you're going to try to then factor in, instead of a 25% increase, I increase the PPC budget by 25%. Now I'm looking for a 50% year-over-year increase for the next month, or as soon as I can get it. And then as soon as I get that increase, I'm going to increase the PPC budget 25% again. And that's how you walk up a $1,000 a month ad budget to $100,000 a month ad budget, taking baby steps with it, one step at a time. And so that is going to be able to automatically, given all the inherent flaws in the conversion tracking where conversions don't show up, you're going to be able to count them all. And yes, it's not perfect, because obviously you can have a surge from here or there, but overall, if you're going to get serious about PPC, then don't do a bunch of other stuff so you can create your control and your experiment. Increase your PPC budgets a little bit at a time, and have hard revenue goals that you're trying to shoot for the company overall to hit with that PPC budget, and then keep having and have a plan to keep increasing your PPC budget in stages to keep walking that overall revenue that you're making up. That's what I'm doing to see if it's working or not, more than anything else that I'm talking about or had talked about today. And if you're an e-commerce business, I'll usually, assuming that for the most part, I'll just look at cart revenue. I'll say my cart revenue is $100,000 a month. We're spending $3,000 a month of PPC. We want it to optimize until our cart revenue is $125,000 on $3,000. If we can, we'll raise the budget from $3,000 a month to $4,000 a month, and then we'll shoot up the new target on the cart revenue. Instead of $125,000, we want would say $140,000, and we'll just keep going up. And I've built multi-million dollar a year companies that generate they're millions of dollars in sales just for PPC that way, starting from basically peanut budgets. That's how it's done. If you want to get serious and you really want to make some money and build an empire, contact me and I'll explain and create a plan for you like that actually can get you from basically zero spend to where you're making $5-10 million a year in sales from this whole process. One step at a time over a 2 to 3 year period, and having 10, 15, 20 goals all in a row that we're going to be able to hit, and the benchmarks all in place. Not many people do that. They just put money in the ads and then they hope their sales go up, and they wing it. Or like I said, they'll just rely on the tracking in their account, and they won't understand that the tracking has a bunch of holes in it. That tracking's good enough inherently to show you what keyword works over another keyword, but it's not going to be able to tell you what your exact profit is. That's not what it's going to do. Unless you're selling a $25 broom, and it'll get close at that point, but it's still not going to be perfect. And the higher the cost of the product purchase, the more it's going to be off, because there's more time between the time that they buy on average and the time that they search, and all the more time there is, the more stuff that can go wrong, basically. So higher commitment, you want to still you're going to have this. You're going to look at your ad account conversion tracking. You're going to look at Google Analytics, because you also have that set up, and you're also going to have a 3-year revenue target broken down by month on a set PPC budget like I talked about. And you're also going to use that to tell if your PPC ads are working overall as well, on top of everything else. If you want to do it like the pros, this is how I'm doing it. The last thing I'll mention about that too is remarketing ads. People think that the banner ads are there. Somebody should see the banner ad. I'm reading an article. I see the banner ad. I click on it. I buy right then. Very, very rare does that actually happen. They see the ad. A lot of times they're subconsciously influenced by it. They were looking for to hire a tax attorney. They Googled it. Later on, you have your marketing ads that mention the testimonials, the reviews of that tax attorney office, which influences the buyer over time. And then later on, 2 weeks from now, I'm like, crap, I have to hire a tax attorney. You're the first person they think about. They go to Google, they Google it, they go to the site. The average person's going to think that banner ad did not work. And so that's another reason why you want to look at having overall revenue targets, not just look at the inherent conversion tracking. Because if you do, and you fall into the mistake most other people are, they're going to say that remarketing ad didn't work, and then they're not going to get near the results you need remarketing coupled with your other advertising, because in marketing, frequency is more important than just reach. You got to spend 10, 15, 20% of your budget just on the follow-up, and done in a nice way that it adds to the sales process, so that you're educating the buyer as to why you are specifically better and for them than anybody else in your space, trickled out over time, and then using several different ads to hit on several different points for the user, or should, if you want to do it the way that I do it. And that all is going to look like a loss on paper inside your ad accounts. But trust me, that's going to double the sales potential that you're going to have off of your same exact ads that's designed to bring new people in. And for all practical purposes, you spend $10 to get somebody to your site, $20 to get somebody to your site, and you're not going to have that banner ad show up for them, which literally cost a penny to have that one banner ad show up one time to that one same person. What are you doing? So just also keep that in mind, just as a side note about tracking and this whole thing. So different, if you're running Google and Facebook, and you have tracking set up in both are going to take credit for the same person lots and lots of times. Know that, and let Google Analytics kind of also be your secondary arbiter of whether or not one works kind of better than the other. But it's not perfect, and can also give you some secondary feedback about what's going on. And if you're using both Google and Facebook at the same time, if you set revenue targets, I'm going to be increasing just Facebook, and then be seeking to have my revenue jump a directly proportional percentage until I can't do it with Facebook anymore. Then I'm going to switch to just increasing Google budget and be shooting for an additional increase in revenue target until I can't do it with Google anymore. Then maybe I'm going to go back to just trying to go increase Facebook, or perhaps in that case I'm going to go to the site and try to optimize so that my site gets a higher revenue per click, and then go back to Google and try to see if I can raise the budget and get a corresponding increase in revenue, so on and so forth. So anyway, that sums up Google Ads / Facebook tracking and Google Analytics tracking and the differences between each. I have a lot of other actual money-making PPC strategies on this channel. If you haven't checked out any of my other videos, you certainly should. I have a blog at guaranteeppc.com/blog that has step-by-step instructions on the way that I build campaigns for our clients that have to guarantee their results. We don't get paid before we get the client results initially, so you can see stuff that really works there. If you have any questions or comments about this kind of tracking that I mentioned here, on whether you're using Google Analytics or Google Ads or what have you, or Facebook ads, leave me a comment down below. I get back to every single person who leaves me a comment or a question on this channel. But I hope you enjoyed this video, and hopefully it made sense, and that you go ahead and set things up, so you get a little bit better.